Good morning again, everybody. Can you guess where I am? Well, I'm actually in the school chapel, but in a rather unusual location there. But I've chosen this spot to be right next to one of our school values posters, because this week, the National Act of Collective Worship is actually on the theme of compassion. Hopefully a value which we know very well and that we're also very used to living out in our daily lives. So, sit back and enjoy reflecting on the theme of compassion.
Hello and welcome back to the Oak National Academy episode 10. I can't believe we've made it this far already.
Today we're going to be talking about compassion.
What? Give over. Another episode on being nice.
Actually, you're right, Hannah. We've done love, kindness, generosity. Not another one.
Whoa. Hold on a second. Back up, you guys. If you're thinking that, then I don't think you know what the word compassion actually means.
Fair enough. You can have the benefit of the doubt for now, Destiny.
Agreed. We'll reserve judgment for later. But let's see what's coming up.
We hear from students at Grace Academy in Solihull.
Bishop Paul Mason will help us understand what compassion is and isn't.
Students from St. Peter's School in Huntingdon give us an activity to try out and lead us in prayer.
And we hear the new Archbishop of York answer questions from some students.
Let's get going. Here's students from the Grace Academy to help us begin to think about compassion.
I think compassion means caring for others, putting other people before yourself.
Not just thinking about your own problems but others as well.
It's basically just another word for empathy. It's putting yourself in someone's shoes whenever you've had an accident.
I think what compassion means to me is to be able to help someone when they need help.
Compassion about caring for each friend or family and you'd help them to struggling.
It means helping other people to show love.
Thanks, guys.
Compassion is more than just being kind or generous, but sadly it's sometimes misunderstood.
Bishop Paul Mason is the Catholic Bishop for the Armed Forces, and we're delighted to have him today to talk about two things compassion isn't and one thing that it is.
First thing, it isn't. A gift that some people have and others don't, like being good at music or sport. The trouble with seeing compassion this way is that you could do nothing for anyone and just tell yourself, oh, compassion's not one of my gifts. Like someone who never makes an effort in sport or music telling themselves, oh, I'm just not gifted that way. Next unhelpful idea is that compassion is simply an emotion. Where compassion is no more than an emotion, then it quickly falls victim to compassion fatigue. Emotions change like the British weather, hot, cold, wet, dry, all in the course of a day. If we only showed compassion when we felt like it, then our actions would be as unpredictable as the weather. So how about a more helpful interpretation? Well, the word compassion actually means to suffer together. A person with compassion is aware of and feels the difficulty another person might have. We're in this together. If one part of the body suffers, it affects the rest.
Thanks, Bishop Paul. Speaking of bishops, there's a new archbishop in town.
This summer, Stephen Cottrell became the new Archbishop of York following a special online service.
Archbishop Stephen is taking over from Dr. John Centimere, who set up the Archbishop of York Youth Trust in 2009.
The Youth Trust exists to empower young people to serve their generation, putting the needs of others before themselves.
Here are some students asking Archbishop Stephen about his new role.
What I'd like to know is, what does Jesus say about compassion in the Bible?
Well, actually, Jesus doesn't say a lot about compassion in the Bible. What Jesus does is show us what compassion looks like through his own actions of compassion, but also through the stories he tells. I guess perhaps the most famous example is the well-known story of the prodigal son, where when the prodigal son returns, the father had compassion on him. So even though that younger son had really let himself down, let his dad down, the father runs out to meet him.
What I'd like to know is, what does compassion mean to you?
I think compassion means to me getting inside somebody else's shoes, trying to see and understand the world from their perspective, and that way you can be of the most help and service to them.
And my question is, given all the turmoil in the world, what are you hoping for right now?
I think what I'm hoping for more than anything is that when we get through this coronavirus pandemic, we won't go back to normal. I don't want to hear those words, let's get back to normal. Because the truth is, what we thought of as normal, well, was killing the planet. And although I cry out for the terrible suffering we see in our world today, actually this does give us an opportunity to think much more carefully and intentionally about what sort of world we want to build and what sort of world we want to inhabit. And actually the whole planet has had a bit of a breather while our cars have been on the drive and the aeroplanes have been on the runway. And to go back to normal, I think would be a terrible disaster.
Compassion is powerful, and probably the most famous example of this is the story that Jesus told of the Good Samaritan.
If you don't know it, in Luke chapter 10, Jesus tells the story of a Jewish traveller who was robbed, beaten up and left for dead along the road.
A priest comes by, but deliberately avoids the man.
A lawyer also comes by, but he too avoids the injured man.
Finally and remarkably, a Samaritan comes by and helps the injured man. But what's so shocking about this story is that Samaritans were actually hated and despised by Jewish people.
After telling this story, Jesus encourages us to go and do likewise.
Sounds like a plan.
Here's Sophie from Grace Academy with some final thoughts on the power of compassion towards everyone.
Compassion is when you have a strong feeling or sympathy or sadness about the suffering of others, as well as a strong desire to help. It is compassion that motivates us to go out of our way to care for someone else, and is one of the most brilliant and powerful human qualities. Compassion is also very important to Christian faith. The Bible shows that Jesus himself showed compassion to all kinds of people: the sick, the lonely, the poor, the hurting, even those who had done things wrong. Jesus saw past social barriers and extended passion to all kinds of people, whatever their gender, race, background or status. The Bible says that God is love, and compassion is a concrete expression of that love in action. Jesus told many stories encouraging people to love their neighbour, and especially to care for those who were suffering. He even taught his followers to show kindness to their enemies. This isn't always an easy task, and it can sometimes be costly, but it also creates good in the world, and when we put compassion into action.
Thank you, Sophie.
Bishop Hall mentioned it earlier. What makes compassion different to other virtues is found when we explore where the word came from.
The word compassion comes from two Latin words.
Com meaning with, and passio meaning to suffer.
Compassion is often thought about being nice, but it's more than this. It's about getting in the trench with people where they're hurting and suffering. Jesus did this, and we are called to do the same.
So, who are you going to help?
Who do you know who is struggling?
Who are you going to get alongside and support?
We'll leave you this week with some ideas and a prayer from some students from St. Peter's in Huntingdon.
We'll also play a track from Lily Joe, a singer-songwriter from Manchester.
Inspired by the famous quote, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." She wrote the track, Be the Change.
Thanks for joining us.
God bless and
be compassionate. Take care.
Turn on the news this morning, feeling the fear inside. Why is everybody fighting? We should be unified. Where can we find the answers? What is the remedy? How can we fix what's broken? It's an emergency. We need a revolution.
compassion to the environment. If you go out somewhere, make sure you don't leave any litter behind. Even better, safely clear up at least one extra piece of litter that isn't yours. If we could all do this, our environment would be a cleaner and happier place.
Show compassion to others. Paint some rocks with inspiring and compassionate messages.
And leave them in places for people to find.
On the outside we're different, inside we're all the same. If we can stop and listen, learn how to make a change. Don't need to be divided, we need to be colorblind. Just need to see the beauty everyone has inside.
We pray for compassion and humility in our hearts.
Help us to think about others with kindness and compassion, to lift each other up instead of putting people down. Help us to be kind and loving, even at times when we don't feel like it.
Help us to remember all those that are in need and find the strength to reach out. Help us to use our talents in a way that is positive, that will benefit others.
Help us to develop an awareness of others so that we know who needs our help. Help us to forgive others instead of seeking revenge.
Help us to find courage even when we're not feeling brave. Amen.
Stand up and face the future. Stand up and be the change. You don't have to fit forever. Don't have to be afraid. If we can stand together, then we can make it right. If we can fight the battle, love will win it every time. Stand up and face the future. Stand up and be the change. You don't have to fit forever. Don't have to be afraid. If we can stand together, then we can make it right. If we can fight the battle, love will win it every time. Love will win it every time. Oh, be the change. Be the change.
So, I do hope that today's act of collective worship has given you lots to think about. It certainly has for me. And I hope that in the week ahead, you take every opportunity that comes to you to show compassion to those people around you. And now all it remains for me to say is work hard, stay safe, take care of yourself, and wishing God's blessing upon you all.